We are going to start our work session. It is March 17th at 9:31. We've got a couple of folks who will be joining us in a few minutes, and I believe we have Councillor Murillo online with us today. Councillors, when we held a work session pretty early in our time here on Zenith, there were some questions about the CEI Hub more broadly and policy around the CEI Hub. And I suggested that we separate those conversations, have the look back conversation, what happened around work between the city and Zenith, separately from the look forward conversation. How are activities at the CEI Hub more broadly regulated, and what are the various tools that we have? Today is the second part of that conversation. We will be hearing from folks at the city, but also at the state and the county who help to regulate the activities that happen at the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub. We will learn about what levers the city has to control those activities, what levers our partners have. And this will, I hope, set us up for a broader conversation about the future of our fuel policy, how to mitigate risks now, and the timeline for potentially storing fuel in less bad places in the future in Oregon. To have those conversations, though, we need background and tools to better understand and be on the same page about what is possible, and again, who has each of those levers. We are not going to get to problem solving today. We have a short period of time and a lot of people to hear from. Just like, frankly, we won't get to the real solutions to keep our community more safe in the short term either. Today, though, is where we start. I suspect that there are a committee or two that may pick up pieces of this conversation moving forward. This is not the end of the conversation. This is laying that framework and giving all of us background again on where the different levers are for the different ways in which we regulate the business at the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub and our fuel sources in Oregon more broadly. We are going to run through information from the city and then hear from some of our partners at the county and the state, and our presenters have asked that we hold substantive questions to the end once we have heard from everybody, because there may be things that are answered by some of the later speakers. But if you have clarification questions as we go, because it may be a little while before we can get to those, please do raise your hand and I'll make sure that we get to you as soon as we can. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Donnie Oliveira to kick us off and introduce the other panelists here. Thank you both. Thank you all three so much for being here today. And Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. I know that this is a lot of time out of your day to be here, but I think it's important for all of us, including you, to hear some of the same information.
Great. Thank you, Council President. Good morning, councilors. Donnie Oliveira for the record. So the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub is a 6-mile stretch of storage tanks and associated infrastructure that poses seismic, hazardous, and climate risk if not mitigated. It is a legacy burden, and like many of the industrial areas of our city, is built alongside and over historic neighborhoods. Council President, thank you so much for extending the amount of time we have with you all today. And yet the work session duration is still truly not adequate enough to outline the history of the site and all the intricacies of the regulatory and oversight framework in place. So our hope today is to provide a high-level overview of the roles and responsibilities of local and state partners with an outline of the CEI's fuel supply functions, the risk the hub poses to human and environmental health, and some of the current and upcoming actions being taken to improve safety and assess mitigation tools. Next slide, please. I want to thank DCA Myers and the public safety team for their partnership in pulling together the emergency response details that help provide a more complete picture of the city's challenges. Along with regulatory responsibilities that Tom Armstrong is going to go over, we think that'll be a starting place for you all to contemplate how to proceed with addressing the challenges that the CEI Hub poses to the city and the region. But in reality, we're going to need a lot more help from our state and county partners. Next slide, please. So the work session is broken up into two sections. We're going to have a presentation from city staff, sort of the foundational information about roles and responsibilities, and then we're going to invite our guest panelists from the state and the county to talk about the role in the CEI Hub, and hopefully leave a little bit at the end for discussions and questions about how we might work together to address the CI Hub. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom Armstrong from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Council President, City Councilors. For the record, I'm Tom Armstrong. I'm a supervising planner at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I've been our lead planner on fossil fuel work now for the last 10 years or so. I'm going to start this morning just giving you an orientation of the CEI Hub itself. Next slide, please. And really sort of start with the strategic approach that's been informing our work, and in terms of what I like to term is a legacy challenge. These are existing facilities that have developed over time in what we now know is a high-risk area. And at the same time, fossil fuels are an essential part of our economy and lifestyle, and yet we need to transition away from them. And so what we've been trying to achieve is to mitigate those risks by limiting the growth of these facilities and making the existing facilities safer. Next slide, please. Just to orient everybody, this is a map of Portland's major industrial and employment zones. And the CEI Hub is located in the Northwest Industrial District. It runs along the Portland Harbor, along Willamette River, and Highway 30 in Northwest Portland. Next slide, please. And the CEI Hub consists of about 11 different fossil fuel terminals that encompass 630 storage tanks and stores over 350 million gallons of fuel products, and all the associated elements that come with that. Pipelines, electrical substations, marine docks, rail lines, all the fuel distribution facilities that come with this sort of congregation of facilities in this one location. Next slide, please. So where does the fuel come from? We get most of our fuel from the refineries up in the Bellingham area of Puget Sound. About 2/3 of it comes down via the Olympic pipeline from Bellingham, and it terminates in Portland. But that pipeline is full. It runs at capacity. It's been at capacity for a number of years now. So we get another 25% or so of our fuel via barge, coming both from the Puget Sound refineries and refineries down in California. And then we get a little bit of fuel and especially renewable fuel products via rail, coming through the two major rail lines that connect through the Columbia Gorge. Next slide, please. Where does the fuel go once it gets into Portland? The CEI Hub serves about 90% of Oregon's fuel supply. So it comes into Portland and then goes back out. There's a smaller pipeline that runs from Portland to Eugene, and there's another smaller fossil fuel terminal down in Eugene. Some of it goes on barge up to the Tri-Cities area to serve Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington, and the rest of it gets distributed via truck out of Portland. There are also two aviation fuel pipelines, one to PDX and one over to the Hillsborough Airport. The other 10% of Oregon's fuel supply is transported in. We get a little bit from truck from California, and then there are pipelines from Utah and Montana that come into the Tri-Cities area, and the fuel gets distributed from there. Next slide, please. So where is the fuel consumed? We don't have a lot of exact data on where in terms of fuel sales or that for that matter, but we do know it closely runs with population, and so when we look at the population, about 43% of the state's population is in the Tri-County area. And then, when you include the rest of the valley, we're up to 70% of the population and fuel consumption in the Willamette Valley. So that fuel is not going very far once it gets to Portland. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to explain a little bit about the multiple bureaus and agencies at all levels of government that have a role or responsibility in regulating the activities at the fossil fuel terminals in the CI hub. Next slide, please. Starting with the city bureaus, again, there are multiple bureaus that touch a part of the CI hub, starting with the Bureau of Emergency Management, which we'll hear a little bit more in just a minute. PBEM is responsible for developing and implementing strategic planning programs to prepare for and respond to emergencies, including hazardous material spills and releases. Portland Fire and Rescue has a dual role in that they are, first responder in an emergency. And then also the city's fire marshal plays a regulatory role in permitting and inspecting these facilities. Portland Permitting and Development reviews development applications for any structures and expansion or alterations to these facilities to ensure they comply with city development codes, and I'll get in a little deeper to that in a moment. The Bureau of Planning and Sustainability plays a number of different roles. We are responsible for regulating land use and developing the policies in the comprehensive plan that are implemented through the zoning code. BPS also runs the franchise utility program, which licenses uses in the public right-of-way. And then finally, BPS manages the city's renewable fuel standard, which is right now is a blending mandate for diesel fuel sold in Portland. The Bureau of Transportation issues permits for improvements in the right-of-way, including pipelines. And then they also establish freight routes for trucks, especially for hauling hazardous materials, including fuel, through the city. And then finally, the Bureau of Environmental Services establishes pollution control standards, as well as managing stormwater and wastewater discharge permits for these facilities. Next slide, please. At the state level, there's also a number of different agencies and departments that are involved in regulating or inspecting these facilities. The Department of Environmental Quality has responsibility for air quality permits and seismic stability assessments. And we have a guest panel coming up to provide more information on those programs. DEQ also has authority for stormwater and wastewater discharge permits and planning for oil spill response. The Oregon State Fire Marshal conducts inspections of these facilities and manages the Community Right to Know program, in which these facilities report to the State Fire Marshal how much material, what kinds of material, the volumes, so that the State Fire Marshal can use that to help local agencies plan for emergency response. And we can have more information on that with another of our guest panelists. The Department of Emergency Management coordinates statewide emergency services, and they respond to emergencies and disasters that affect all or part of the state. The Department of Transportation acts as an agent for the Federal Railroad Administration and inspects railroad track and cars and signal crossings and operating practices. ODOT also receives quarterly reports describing the type and quantity of hazardous materials that are transported via rail and shares that information to help inform emergency response. And then finally, the Building Codes Division regulates pressurized piping for chemicals and petroleum products. They are the agency that's responsible for review and inspection of improvements to the pipelines, to the piping at the terminals themselves. Next slide, please. And then at the federal level, the Federal Rail Administration is responsible for regulating the railroads, including the handling of hazardous materials. FSMA, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, is responsible for regulating interstate pipelines and natural gas pipelines. And the Environmental Protection Agency responds to hazardous material spills. And finally, the U.S. Coast Guard is the lead agency for incidents that happen in the coastal zone, which for our area is loosely defined as any waterway, including the Columbia River up to the Bonneville Dam and the Willamette River up to the Willamette Falls. The Coast Guard also certifies that oil-carrying vessels have the financial ability to pay for the cost of cleanup in the event of an oil spill. And they are part of the response in terms of when a spill does occur. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the many different levels and agencies that have regulatory responsibilities. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what the city is responsible for. Next slide, please. One more. Next slide. There we go. So in terms of starting at the basic level for a building permit, any new construction, expansion, alteration of a structure, including storage tanks, requires a building permit that gets reviewed by Portland Permitting and Development. And they review that against both our city code, the Oregon state building codes, and the fire code. The city's fire marshal gets involved with reviewing and permitting any storage tank that handles hazardous material that's larger than 60 gallons. So, that's a pretty small tank there where the fire marshal gets involved. Again, any change on site, such as replacing lighting or pumps, requires electrical or mechanical permits. And I will say, again, this is a distinction that when it comes to plumbing and piping, the city's authority is over essentially water lines. And that the hazardous materials, the fuel lines, are the responsibility of the state building code division. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to get a little bit more into how these fossil fuel terminals are regulated through the zoning code. And I'm going to start with, we have adopted within our zoning code some definitions for fossil fuels and renewable fuels that really set up the regulatory framework. I will note that with our definition of renewable fuels and the reference that it cannot have more than 5% fossil fuel content, that sets a very high bar for what we define for land use regulatory purposes as what is a renewable fuel. And that what we're really, these are the renewable inputs that then get blended with the fossil fuel products that then get marketed and go to the gas stations and the other outlets. And so it is the inputs that we consider to be the renewable fuel, and that once it's blended with that fossil fuel product, it is all still considered a fossil fuel under the purposes of the zoning code and what we regulate. Next slide, please.
Madam President, can I interrupt with a clarifying?
Yes, go ahead.
You said that this is a high bar. I'm trying to understand whose playing field we're on with respect to high bar. I'm just trying to understand our definition here and what that means both in the market and to everyday people.
So if you look at, for example, diesel fuel gets it mixed at various levels in the marketplace. There can be an 80-20 mix, 80% fossil mixed with 20% biofuel or renewable. And that gets sold at a fuel station as a, what am I looking for? A renewable diesel. that 20% renewable content is what qualifies as renewable under this, and I'll get to this in a moment and why that makes a difference. But that once it gets mixed into that 80-20, we still consider that under the zoning code and which storage tanks you can use and what you can do with those storage tanks, that's still considered a fossil fuel, whereas I think like the DEQ Clean Fuels program will count that as part, as part of their clean fuel program, so to speak. And this will become clearer maybe if I can get just a little further into this. So the other thing we've done in the zoning code is create a special use category called bulk fossil fuel terminals. And we've defined that as being any terminal that has more than 2 million gallons of storage tank capacity and has access to a regional transloading facility. They have a connection to the pipeline or a railroad or a dock, something that is bringing that fuel in from outside the region. And just for reference, the 2 million gallon standard, the smallest terminal we have has about 12 million gallons of storage capacity. Next slide, please.
Can you give folks just a little more context for 2 million as we're looking at that picture with the tanks? Like how many tanks is that? What does that mean? What amount of supply is that?
Yeah, when we set this standard back in 2016, the 2 million gallon capacity was set at what we calculated at the time was what was being carried in one unit train coming into Portland, and that and the typical practice is a train comes in, offloads into these tanks, you get enough fuel in the tanks, and then a ship will come up to the dock, and then that fuel can be offloaded into the ship. It would be very expensive in terms of ship time to have that ship at the dock and have multiple trains come in and directly offload into that ship. That's why it gets offloaded into the tanks. You build up enough fuel product, and then it gets offloaded all at once into a tanker. So that's how we set that standard. As for this specific facility that we're looking at here, I don't know off the top of my head, but I would guess that it's 10 to 12, or actually more than that, probably on the order of 30 to 40 million gallons of fuel storage in what we're looking at in that picture. I will say the other thing that we have included in the zoning code is some provisions that look at ownership of all of these parcels. And so that parcel highlighted in blue, what you see in pink is what's considered all one terminal, even though that parcel in blue is across Northwest Front Avenue from the storage tanks and doesn't have any storage tanks on it. That company could not build additional fossil fuel storage on that parcel and say, well, this parcel only has 2 million has less than 2 million gallons on it. So we have provisions in there to sort of trace the ownership of the parcels and consolidate that into so that it doesn't create a loophole where multiple different ownership entities could string together to create a bunch of small 2 million gallon facilities.
And I believe Councillor Canal has a question before we let you keep going as well.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any bulk fossil fuel terminals outside of the CEI hub, but within city limits? Or are all bulk fossil fuel terminals?
I believe there is one off of Columbia Boulevard. It's a propane distribution facility that may qualify as a bulk fossil fuel terminal. They're pretty close in terms of the storage. They receive all of their propane product via rail. But that's the only larger facility that has that rail connection and a large amount of storage. But off the top of my head, I can't remember how much storage tank capacity they have at their facility.
Thank you.
So once we've defined what a bulk fossil fuel terminal is, what we've done is we've prohibited new ones outright. So you can't create a new fuel terminal with more than 2 million gallons of storage tank capacity. And we have designated the existing fossil fuel terminals as a limited use. And we have limited their storage tank capacity to that which existed as of August 2022, which is the last time council adopted these regulations. We've been in a sort of endless appeal cycle since 2016 and have finally prevailed as of about a year ago. The state appeals were exhausted. There is still one federal appeal in federal court that is still pending. But for the most part, in terms of the state regulations, that August 22 is the effective date. And so what this, next slide, please, let's go there. So when we adopted this, there are a number of exceptions in the zoning code to get at the issue of, well, what is not a bulk fossil fuel terminal? And we wanted to make it clear, gas stations are not a bulk fossil fuel terminal. Many of the distributors go to these larger facilities, get product via truck, bring it back to their facility, and from there distribute to other parts of the state. And so those distributors that are bringing in the product in and out exclusively by truck are not considered bulk fossil fuel terminals. And then we made a distinction about sort of manufacturers that get fossil products, liquid fossil products, and use them as an input to their manufacturing. And so we wanted to make that clear that they were not a fossil fuel terminal. I think the key one here is around fleet transportation. And there is an exception for fuel that is exclusively used at airports, marine terminals, or rail yards. And so what we wind up with is a structure where at the existing bulk fossil fuel terminals, in terms of fossil fuels, they are allowed to, they are limited to use their existing tank capacity. They are allowed to reconfigure that tank capacity so that they can demolish older tanks, consolidate them into larger, newer tanks as their business model sees fit. We wanted to allow for that so that they can and will make seismic upgrades and make safer tanks. The other thing is that they can add storage capacity for non-fuel fossil products, things like asphalt, solvents, lubricants. And then there is the other exceptions are for these fleet transportation fuels, aviation fuel, for the exclusive use there. That provision in particular was put in because at the time, aviation fuel is the only fuel component that we see is forecasted to increase in use, in demand over time. And there's more information about these fuel forecasts in your supplemental information memo. The other components are, the motor gasoline and the diesel. Those are expected to and have been declining over time and eventually replaced with renewable fuel products. But aviation fuel is the only one that was forecasted to increase, which is why this exception was included there. And then finally, there's an exception for the Portland's renewable fuel standard. And so any sort of storage tank or facility that's needed to supply that fuel would be allowed under the zoning code. I think what this sets up and what we have seen in the one or two cases that have utilized or sought to utilize these exceptions is that we set up a system of conditions that require inspections and third-party certifications that those facilities are being exclusively used for that purpose, whether it's renewable or aviation fuel. Next slide, please. And then in the other way that the city regulates activities is through the franchise agreement, which is a license or a right to use the public right-of-way. This applies to a number of different uses. You think the power lines, the cell phone towers, the cable lines, but it also includes pipelines for fossil fuel distribution. And there are 6 of those franchises that operate in the CI hub that actually governs the use of those pipelines running underneath the streets. And then this program works with PBOT, who actually issues the permits for physical improvements in the right-of-way, say when they need to go dig up the street to fix a pipeline or something like that. That concludes my portion of this presentation in terms of the zoning code structure. I'm going to transition and hand things over to Rachit Narwal, the Chief Resilience Officer, to explain the emergency management side of things.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, Council. My name is Rachit Narwal, and I serve as the Chief Resilience Officer at Portland Bureau of Emergency Management. As Council Chair mentioned, that there's a lot of information that we are sharing today, and I'm going to provide a high-level summary of major risks associated with CEI Hub location, where it's located, our current emergency response plans and operational guidelines that touch upon the hazards that are associated with CEI Hub, and the active risk reduction and mitigation efforts that are underway. This is a high-level summary. If more information is needed on any of these specific items, I can provide that information either after the session or however the council would request. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the primary risk we are addressing in terms of CEI Hub, of where it's located, is liquefaction. The Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, or as what we call the big one, poses a significant hazard to the Pacific Northwest. Numerous studies have detailed the catastrophic potential of a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. We'll talk about one of such case study in just a few slides. One of the major cascading effects of such an earthquake is liquefaction, which happens when saturated soil loses strength and behaves like a liquid, typically triggered by earthquakes in areas with wet soil, such as near river, lakes, or oceans. This can lead to landslides, sand blows, and structural damage. The CEI Hub is situated on soil that's susceptible to liquefaction and lateral spreading during the earthquake. Compounding this, many of the storage tanks were constructed before modern seismic building codes, as Tom mentioned, rendering them highly vulnerable to an earthquake. Next slide, please. So this map illustrates Portland's major industrial areas highlighted in gray. The CEI Hub is located along the Willamette River, adjacent to Highway 30 in Northwest Portland, the yellow part. A common question that we get often asked by the county, by the community as well, is can we relocate CEI Hub to a safer location within Portland? And the short answer is no, there's no safer location within the city. That means that this necessitates a broader state and regional discussion, which has now started, and we'll talk about it towards the end of our presentation. Next slide, please. Now, this is a map of liquefaction risk in the event of an earthquake, the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. As you can see, the high risk area corresponds with our industrial area in dark red, which to say that there's no safe place in Portland to relocate industry like CEI hub within the city's industrial zones. Thank you. Next slide, please. Liquefaction is not the only hazard that we have associated with, or like the earthquake is not the only hazard that's associated with CEI hub. CEI hub is also located next to Forest Park, which is a wildfire hazard area presenting the risk of fuel terminal fire causing a wildfire in the Forest Park. Portland Fire actively engages in risk reduction efforts both in Forest Park and at the CEI hub, including annual fire and life safety reports, fire alarm tests, and site inspections at the CEI hub facility to mitigate risk of fire. And this also highlights that we often limit CEI hub to a liquefaction kind of hazard, but there are other hazards that are associated with the facility, with where it's located. Next slide, please. To understand the potential impact of Cascadia subduction zone earthquake on the CEI hub, Multnomah County Office of Sustainability and City of Portland's Bureau of Emergency Management commissioned a comprehensive study in 2020, which was finalized in 2022. The collaborative study aims to quantify the potential fossil fuel release from a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and evaluate the resulting damage to the surrounding environment and community. What you see on your slides are some of the highlights from the report. The CEI hub's location adjacent to Willamette River in Forest Park raised significant concern about the risk of accidents, spills, or catastrophic failures following a major seismic event. During a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, the existing containment structures are projected to be inadequate to contain the combined release from multiple tank failures. The scale of fuel release could rival the 2010 Deepwater Horizon disaster, the largest oil spill in the U.S. water. So it can be pretty catastrophic. Notably, the study revealed that the average age of the tank with documented construction years is 1954, predating the implementation of modern seismic building codes and the understanding of the earth. And since then, our understanding of the earthquake and as well as the construction has improved significantly. An assessment on safety of these tanks is ongoing, and our guest panelist from DEQ will talk more about it in towards the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So this slide shows agencies that could be involved in emergency response if there was a significant incident at the CEI hub, depending on what the on-ground needs are. What's the response needs. Tom talked about roles and responsibilities of different agencies earlier in the presentation. To add to that, in emergency management, the response that we use is that all emergencies begin locally. So depending on the cause, magnitude, and scale of the incident, various local, regional, and federal agencies will become involved in the response. And we'll start with all the local agencies. So the city agencies, Portland Fire, Bureau of Emergency Management, Environmental Services, Transportation, and other agents, the Multnomah County Emergency Management Office. These agencies will be the first agencies that will start the response process. And as the incident escalates, will involve state and federal agencies. For example, local emergency management agencies will lead citywide coordination, alert and warning, and shelter provisions for any displaced individuals if any significant incident were to happen. On-scene response will be led by Portland Fire, as Tom talked about it. And if there's a subsurface spill into our causing potential fuel release into our sewer system, Bureau of Environmental Services will be involved. Portland Bureau of Emergency Management will help with citywide coordination, lead alert warning, and work with county on sheltering. BES Spill Protection Community Response Program provides 24/7 duty officer coverage for investigating and responding to spill notification and alert. So there are programs right now that are in place that touch upon potential accidents, spills that could happen within CEI Hub facility. And I would just add, there's no program that's specifically aiming at potential incident accident at CEI Hub, but these are programs that exist for anything that happens across the city, related to the Bureau's capability. So CEI Hub businesses are federally required under Oil Pollution Act and Clean Water Act to maintain industrial stormwater pollution control plans and facility spill prevention and facility spill response plans, which Bureau of Environmental Services reviews and approves. Facility spill plans requires immediate notification to BES Spill Protection Community Response Program. However, in my conversation with several bureaus across the city, a multi-facility event plan of this scale has not been developed and is needed right now. As the local agencies reach their capacity, resources are requested from state and federal agencies, and they start to come in picture. We do initial notification right away to any concerning agencies, but resource requests are submitted as local resources are exhausted. In a major spill, as I highlighted in my previous slide, Environmental Protection Agency and DEQ will get involved in the response, and these agencies will be responsible for ensuring that businesses are held accountable financially as well if the spill is in our waterways or on land surface. OEM, and FEMA will support our emergency response as requested. Please note that in event of a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, the CEI Hub will be one of the many life safety issues that these agencies will address across the state of Washington, state of Oregon, and essentially state of Alaska and California, depending on how wide the impact is. This underscores the critical need to enhance our alert warning system and emergency management planning for neighborhoods in the immediate vicinity of the CEI Hub, where we might not be able to get right away. Not just in response, all these agencies have a role in risk reduction as well, risk reduction and preparedness as well. For example, DEQ's assessment of seismic vulnerability of fuel tanks, or the recent announcement about the EPA requiring 9 CEI Hub facilities to buy and install air sampling equipment to monitor concentration of air contaminant. These are some examples how different agencies are now working towards reducing the risk to the local community and also helping with mitigation efforts that are now have started. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in my previous slide, we currently lack previous few slides. We currently lack a comprehensive plan to address all hazards and risk associated within the CEI Hub. So basically, there's no one single plan that addresses everything that's ongoing with CEI Hub or all the facilities that are within CEI Hub. There are several different plans and bureaus that have pieces of what's going on, depending on what hazard we are talking about within the CEI Hub. And on this slide, you see some of the
Rashid, I don't know if you can hear us, but you just froze and we have not heard the last couple of sentences from you. Donnie, are you able to shoot him a quick text and see if,
I texted him, Donnie.
Oh, thank you.
perfect, thank you.
Jeremy can stand in.
Let me just,
Oh, it looks like we have him back. Rashid, do we have you back?
yes, sorry.
There we go.
Thank you.
I don't know where I was cut off. Was I on hazard slide?
Yes, yeah, we heard the first few sentences of the hazard slide.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so what I was talking about was that these are some of the hazards that are associated with CEI Hub. So there's risk of earthquake, unhealthy air. If there was a fire, industrial fire, or a fuel release, because if structures were to collapse, there's even if they don't catch on fire, the fuels, the chemicals that evaporate could make the air pretty toxic very quickly. So there's definitely unhealthy air could become a key issue, and that's where we also get a lot of inquiry from the local community. I did talk about oil spills in previous slides. when I was talking about roles and responsibilities of different agencies and the risk of wildland and or industrial fire. So there's no one plan that addresses all these hazards. We have different plans that touch upon these hazards. There's city's emergency operations plan, which talks about overarching emergency response. What that would be like for any hazard. These plans are not specific to CEI Hub. There's city's earthquake response framework. Again, how will city respond to an earthquake across the city? And then unhealthy air operation guideline, which is more catered to what we use for whenever our air quality starts to deteriorate. We have this plan which does give us some notice in terms of air. Basically, that means is that air quality is going to get bad, so we do track it daily. However, in a incident at CEI Hub, the air quality can change pretty quickly, so it could potentially be a no-notice event where a timely alert and warning and evacuation could be needed. Next slide, please. In addition to the plans that I mentioned on my previous slide, our hazard-specific plans, we have emergency response functional annexes that address cities' response capabilities. Again, the scope of these plans is citywide. They're not specific to CEI Hub. With our current capabilities and informed by lessons from major disasters in LA and Hawaii, we recognize that we are underprepared to issue timely alert to the local communities for events beyond routine fire and police activity. We're talking about within minutes here, so from minutes to up to 50 minutes. That could be a big issue from what we have seen across the country with recent disasters. We have also received inquiries from community members in Linton neighborhood regarding the need for local alert and warning capabilities and to do more work in terms of evacuation planning. You would also notice that the plans that I have on this slide, some of these plans have not been updated recently. We are aware, but we currently do not have sufficient staffing within our planning to maintain a appropriate planning update cycle. So yeah, I wanted to flag that out. Similarly, the evacuation plan that I address on this slide addresses citywide framework for evacuation. It's not specific to CEI Hub. What I would like to also highlight for council's awareness, so as I was talking about different hazards that are associated with CEI Hub, so there's wildfire, there could be potential landslides if it was right after the earthquake. There could be risk of fire, there could be risk of unhealthy air, there could be issue of structures collapsing. So a street that you mark as an evacuation route might not be available. So there are a lot of challenges and restrictions around CEI Hub for the community members for us to do an evacuation planning. However, that being said, more dedicated resources are needed for us to specifically focus on communities around CEI Hub, and I'll get to that in my next few slides. Next slide, please. Shifting to community preparedness, here are some of the highlights of PBEM's work within the Linton neighborhood. This includes multiple training events that we have done there, such as full basic net training in September 2014 and May of 2018. Community CPR and first aid certification class in November 2023. The Linton Community Center is also a designated beacon site, which is basic earthquake emergency communication node. These sites are equipped with a secure and fully stocked cache with communication equipment. PBEM also collaborated with Linton Net to establish 9 hilltop caches, which are small equipment caches containing medical and communication equipment strategically placed in each of Linton's mini neighborhoods. Through our community preparedness training, we teach 2-week ready program for community members to prepare for sheltering in place where it's possible and safe. PBEM Community Preparedness Manager Jeremy Van Kuren is in the room today and can share more information about our community preparedness program if needed. Next slide, please. Regarding chemical storage within urban areas, it's important to recognize, and I think a council member asked a question about it earlier, it's important to recognize that CEI Hub is not the sole location within the city that stores potentially dangerous chemical that could be dangerous post-earthquake. To help local communities get organized about this, the local emergency planning committee are community groups that are pre-plan for hazardous material spill and releases, focusing on the EPA's list of lists. These are worst case chemicals that are stored within the urban areas. This group is managed through Oregon State Fire Marshal's office, and these committees are essential for preparedness when it comes to these dangerous chemicals. One of our guest panelists will provide further details shortly on this particular committee. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to pivot from emergency response to risk reduction and mitigation effort to talk about some of the efforts that are ongoing. Next slide, please. So these are 5 current bills that have had their first hearing, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks ago. The city has testified in support of all these 5 bills. I'd highlight that HB 2949, which mirrors Multnomah County's effort to ensure fuel terminals have financial capacity for post-disaster cleanup, similar to programs that are in place in Washington and California. This will initiate a state-level study and legislative report for further action. I believe we have a county guest panelist who will talk more about county's efforts that support this bill. I'd also highlight HB 3450, which directly addresses the CEI Hub's location and that it's in high-risk area, sparkling a statewide discussion on enhancing the safety and resilience of liquid fuel distribution facilities across the state. HB 2151 addresses expanding the permissible use of seismic risk mitigation fund. This is a fund that's right now is managed by DEQ. So this bill basically would allow us to use this seismic risk mitigation fund for more CEI Hub related work that could include potentially installing better alert warning systems within the community. That's what community is requesting. So we are supporting this bill. Our guest panelists from DEQ will elaborate on these efforts. So these are some of our current initiatives. Furthermore, I'd add that at the local level, funding from CEI Hub businesses for a dedicated planner to coordinate local and regional agencies would be advantageous and, to be honest, needed. This position could help facilitate risk reduction and response planning specific to CEI Hub. So now so many different agencies have small pieces of what their role would be in CEI Hub in case there is a multi-facility catastrophic incident within CEI Hub. There is work needed that would allow us to coordinate actions, be in terms of response, risk reduction, or mitigation across all levels and agencies. However, I believe a council mandate to CEI Hub would be needed for us to secure such funding. In addition to these bills that I just talked about, there are other statewide efforts, including statewide resiliency planning initiatives that are worth mentioning. Our guest speaker, State Chief Resilience Officer John Apepethmi will talk more about such efforts. Finally, our county speaker will discuss the county's financial assurance program, which mandates that CEI Hub owners and operators assume financial responsibility for damages caused by stored fossil fuel and hazardous material. Next slide, please. Oh, yes. So I'll now pass to Eric Engstrom to talk more about future projects related to CEI Hub.
Thank you. Good morning. My name, for the record, is Eric Engstrom. I'm the Interim Director at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. This slide, as Tom mentioned earlier, one of the roles the BPS plays is to manage the currency and updating of the zoning code as well as our comprehensive plan. So in that role, we applied with our other partner agencies for a grant from FEMA, which is a grant that provides staff time and potential for consultant resources to look forward, to be forward-looking around this and to research options for what our policy or code might look like going forward. This is an opportunity to turn our eyes forward and think about where we would rather be. Tom described the policies we have now. We're in the beginning of this process. There will be public involvement opportunities, and including for this council and committees potentially, and the community before we develop those options. So again, we're at the beginning of this and want to provide some opportunity for the community and council to shape where we're going with this before we zero in on the specifics. There are a lot of options available to us. We could look more carefully at transloading, which Tom described is an element of what goes on at CEI Hub. We could look longer down the time horizon to how we want to get to that full electrification over time, and what that might mean for the CEI Hub, and or policies that go in tandem with potential statewide efforts to look at alternatives to the CEI Hub. So all of those different directions are potentially on the table with research and exploration through that project. As all zoning and comprehensive plan projects, this would start with public involvement, would eventually lead to a proposed draft that would go to the Planning Commission and then on to City Council.
One more.
Next slide, please. I think this is the last slide. So overall, in summary, there are a number of things that were described in terms of risk management, the current policies that limit future development of new terminals, the requirements for seismic upgrades, the discussion around financial responsibility, which you heard about, the efforts at all levels of government to reduce demand for liquid fossil fuels, and then what you heard from around our preparedness for emergencies, and obviously more work there as well.
All right. So now, Council President, we're going to invite our panelists up for the next presentation.
Thank you very much to all of the folks from the city who shared that information with us. I believe we are joined now by members of the State Emergency Management Team, DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, and Multnomah County. Who is coming up first? Thank you so much for being here. If you could introduce yourself and go ahead and jump right in.
Hi, everyone. I'll just give brief remarks. My name is John Bashatinsky. I'm the Director of Sustainability for Multnomah County. Over the past couple of years, as Ratchet was mentioning, the county's been looking at the possibility of imposing financial responsibility requirements on the facilities, the bulk storage facilities as they were described earlier. These facilities that store 2 million gallons or more of fossil fuels. The reason for this has also been described. Basically, as our emergency management director likes to say, the CEI Hub was not built in the bad location. It was built in the worst possible location from a seismic safety point of view. Of course, there's massive human toll, but there's also obviously a big environmental toll. And as it stands today, a lot of the responsibility for the cleanup, while it's squarely on the facilities that caused the mess, they're referred to as responsible parties. There's some doubt that they'll have enough financial wherewithal to pay for the cleanup. So I'll just speak to a few of the reasons why we believe that to be the case. The Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which was put into place by Congress in the wake of the Exxon Valdez spill, requires that facilities, onshore facilities, deepwater ports, those are the two types of facilities in the CEI Hub, have to be responsible for the damages they cause up to a certain point with certain exceptions. So the amount that they're liable for is set by the U.S. Coast Guard, and that number today is somewhere around $700 million for onshore facilities. The type of facility dictates the amount of liability that they have to have, or the cap under which they're responsible for. Exceptions are there, however. So, the first big exception is the cap, right? So liability above a certain level, they're not responsible for. The other is the law provides exceptions under, terrorism, acts of war, or acts of God. So those are a few, potential limitations. Congress also established a fund to help pay for the cleanup costs or liabilities beyond the cap. And that fund would also pay if we're not sure who is the responsible party. So the state can tap that fund to help pay for cleanup if there's a slick. They don't know who is responsible for it. They can't send the bill to anybody. There's still money out there to pay for that cleanup. That mechanism is also capped at $1 billion per incident, and the $500 million for cleanup. The study that Ratchet mentioned earlier, has a couple of startling facts in it. One is that this spill, the big earthquake hits, and these facilities start to fail all simultaneously. It could be a spill that matches the volume of the BP Deepwater Horizon spill, but rather than occurring out in the Gulf of Mexico, it would be occurring in the heart of a major American city. So that's obviously very concerning. It also estimates that about half the fuel would spill into the river. Type of fuel that it is really would kind of dictate how, whether it sinks or floats or evaporates or whatever. But the modeling that was done in that report estimates that the fuels will actually flow all the way to the mouth of the Columbia River. So there's a huge geographic impact for the damages, and untangling the web of financial responsibility in the wake of that disaster is going to be difficult to say the least. So the point of the county's pursuit of financial responsibility program was to ensure that these facilities have the financial mechanisms in place to have funding to start paying for cleanup, regardless of whether it's a subsidiary or there's a bankruptcy or any other kinds of causes. And so that's at the heart of what we're trying to do at the county. There's been one attempt so far. The Commissioners Singleton and Moyer have both committed to bringing that policy forward on a simultaneous track. As Ratchet mentioned, the entire board of county commissioners, including the chair, sent a letter to the House Committee on Emergency Management, Veteran Services, saying that they support an amendment to House Bill 2949 that would move that bill from a study bill to actual legislation, regulatory legislation. That we have a great model for that from Washington. Washington State has an oil spill financial responsibility program that really provides a template that we can use to ensure that facilities in the CEI hub and bulk fuel storage facilities in general, not just here in Multnomah County, but throughout the state, have that financial responsibility mechanism in place. And we think this would work really well with the oil spill financial, the fuel tank seismic stability program, both providing requirements that they work towards preventing a spill, but also having the requirements in place that they would have the financial, mechanism in place to pay for the cleanup. So that's my quick synopsis, and I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm sure the folks from our colleagues at DEQ will have more to offer.
Thank you so much. Councillor Smith, did you have a quick question?
Thank you, Madam President. Good to see you, John. I am a county commissioner for District 1, and I've heard a lot of conversation about the CEI hub here in the Central City area. My district starts at 82nd, and it goes out east to 162nd and south to Southeast Clatsop. And so within that area, there is a space called the unincorporated areas. Mm-hmm. And I did not hear you speak about who is responsible for that unincorporated area. That unincorporated area is like somewhere between 90th and 105th, and then you have Maywood Park, which is not in District 1. It's its own city, and I haven't heard anything about that. And then our district, it borders on Marine Drive, which also borders the Columbia River. And so if you could kind of tell me what is who is responsible for those areas as well?
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. I would say there's overlapping responsibilities for unincorporated areas. There's pockets of there's urban unincorporated areas, and for the most part, those urban unincorporated areas are managed either through an intergovernmental agreement in terms of land use and other urban services are managed through intergovernmental agreement between the cities. So either City of Gresham or City of Portland.
Right, but in terms of this and these particular bills, we need to have language that specifically points out who is responsible for the unincorporated areas in my district in the City of Portland, because I can guarantee you they will be calling us to try to figure out if something happens. We're less than a half a mile from the Columbia River on the furthest northern part of my district. And the other piece is, are there any concerns for this liquefaction in District 1?
Commissioner Smith, in general, the District 1, as you move east in Multnomah County, the soils become more stable. So there's less risk as you move east. And there's no bulk fuel storage facilities located in District 1.
Okay.
There would be impacts, obviously, but the impacts would be less direct than they would be in District 4, for example.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Green?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, John, for testifying today. My question is about the current effort at the county, at the board to kind of take up the risk bonding question again. Can you just describe a little bit about what that's intending to do, and just for everyone's edification?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Green, for the question. So we've been really modeling our efforts off of the Washington State program. So maybe the best way to do it is to describe the Washington State program to my knowledge. In Washington State, facilities like the ones at the CEI Hub are required to obtain a certificate of financial responsibility, or COFIRD for short. The certificate of financial responsibility, there's a calculation put in place based on the storage capacity of the facility, and that then dictates a dollar amount for which they have to prove that they have a certain amount of financial protection in place. They're able to prove that by obtaining one or a combination of a few different types of financial assurance mechanisms under Washington state law. That can be an insurance policy. That could be a certificate, a letter of credit from a financial institution. It could be a bond, or it can be a trust. So under the insurance program, the state is listed as co-insured. Under the trust, the state gets a little bit complicated, and I'm not a trust lawyer, so I'm not going to pretend to, but essentially the state is able to be the recipient of and distributor of those funds under a trust, and a trust is just like you put money aside into a separate account, that money's there. If there's a triggering event, then the money's used for its intended purpose. And then the certificate of financial responsibility, the letter of credit and the bond have a standby trust, like an empty trust, that if the certificate of credit or the bond is liquidated, then it would fill the trust, and then the trust would act in the way that it was stipulated under the law and under the contract. And so essentially, as long, under the Washington State program, as long as the responsible party, the party that spilled the material from their facility is fulfilling their obligations, then they're able to utilize their own resources, utilize the resources that are, from their insurance policy or from their trust account. But if the company fails to perform their duty for whatever reason, then the state steps in and is able to distribute funds to the impacted party based on the people who assert damages because of it. And I should state too, under both federal and state law, one entity that would be suffering damages would be the sovereign, in this case being the city of Portland or the Multnomah County. If the properties in Linton are no longer inhabitable, be they industrial properties or residential properties, we wouldn't be collecting tax revenue. That's just one example. Obviously, there would be substantial costs associated with responding to an emergency. Those could be recoverable under the program as well.
Thank you for that. And I recall last year at the county, there was invited testimony from John Talberth of the Center for Sustainable Economy. And when he laid out kind of the findings from a Brookings paper that kind of described risk bonding, I think one of the things he had said is that there is a sort of a hierarchy of quality to these assurance mechanisms. And in his view, the least effective is an insurance policy, because then the city, the sovereign, is then tied up in court to potentially go after the performance of that policy, which, and I think, I don't know if the county resolution is speaking to any of that hierarchy of quality there, but I just wanted to flag that for my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Green. Maybe I would adjust that characterization a little bit to say that, under federal law, a guarantee just from the company is allowed sometimes. Just say like, hey, we're good for it. So that's probably the least good one. And then there's something called the concept called captive insurance, where a company is able to set up there and say like, hey, we have our own little insurance company that covers our liabilities, and that will pay for any resulting damages. And so those are definitely, I would say, sort of under that tiering, less desirable. Since the county policy isn't final and is being developed, I really can't speak to exactly what the county policy would or wouldn't do.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Councilor Smith, did you have an additional?
I do have an additional question. So I want to go back just a little bit, John. I don't know if you know that Portland Airport is in my district as well.
Oh, okay.
And
great.
so maybe. So are you telling me that there are no underground fuel for the airport at all?
Councilwoman Smith, I apologize. I didn't realize that the PDX was in District 1. But the airport does have above ground storage facilities,
Okay.
and that are subject to the regulations that have been described today. I'm not aware of whether or not they have any underground storage facilities, but under Oregon state law, all underground storage facilities are regulated by the state, and local regulation is preempted by state law.
So just so that we're covering everything in the district, because I'm thinking about 33rd and Marine Drive, and you know where Salty's is, and I do everything by restaurants where I like to eat.
I've been to Salty's. It's a good place.
So, and I'm thinking, and then right as you go around, you have the Multnomah County, the Water Patrol.
Yeah, the River Patrol, yeah.
Yeah, and the River Patrol. And then you have the airport to the south. And I could certainly see some of that marina that goes from 33rd all the way down. They have all those boats and everything. They have fuel somewhere. And so if we have the big one of sorts, I'm just trying to figure out who is going to be responsible for what, and who knows that they have to be responsible for what. I mean, there's some entities, and I'm going to be meeting with Curtis soon, but there are some entities that I think you guys need to spell out that's real, so that people can really understand who is going to be responsible for what. Because I'm going to tell you, I think they're going to come back to the city of Portland, and we have governments within governments that are in that area in District 1 that I don't know that you can totally visualize. I had the luxury of campaigning there for a couple months, so I know that district,
Yeah.
where it is, and I'm just really concerned about the airport?
So the airport does have a large jet fuel storage facility. As a matter of fact, 100% of the state's jet fuel is right here stored in the city of Portland. The good news is that under the fuel tank seismic stability program, the port partners that manage the fuel storage facility, it's a sort of a cooperative, owned by multiple entities. They are going ahead and redesigning that whole facility in order to meet the state's seismic requirements. So they're among the fastest in complying with that. In terms of smaller fueling facilities, I'm just gonna have to plead ignorance because I don't, I'm really been focused on the larger facilities that store, in excess of 2 million gallons. And so I don't really know as much, and maybe some of our DEQ colleagues are gonna have a better sense of those smaller facilities.
I will ask them, they have to have something right there in the marina.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming and testifying today.
Thank you for being with us today. I think we are going to stay in the theme of emergency management and invite up two folks from the state. We have Jana Papatamayu from the Governor's Chief Resilience Officer. Thank you for being here. And Marianne Christian from the Office of the State Fire Marshal. If you could both join us. And it looks like we have Jana online. Jana, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Sure. Well, I'll just be brief, and I regret I don't see Mike Kortenhoff here from the state DEQ. But if he is, I would defer to him to go first because some of what I was going to share refers to the excellent work he's already completed.
Jana, we do have him in the room. Do we need to switch order here?
I would be delighted if you let him go first because he's so smart, and really what I'm going to say is just going to build on. Why don't
we go to DEQ first, and then we'll bring up Mike Kortenhoff and Christine Svetkovich from DEQ. We'll do that part of the presentation and then move to emergency management. Introduce yourselves and then go right ahead and jump in.
Right, thank you. Good morning, Madam President and City Councilors. My name is Christine Svetkovich, and I am DEQ's Northwest Region Administrator. We appreciate the invitation to be with you this morning. DEQ's Northwest Region implements all of Oregon's environmental laws in the Portland metro area and the 3 North Coast counties. This work includes issuing and working on permits and certifications to protect discharges and emissions associated with land, air, and water. We also conduct compliance reviews, do enforcement activities, respond to complaints, work on clean water plans, and cleanup sites, and much more. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Mike to talk more in detail about the Seismic Stability Program.
Good morning. Council President and Councilors. My name is Mike Kortenhoff. I'm with the Oregon DEQ. I'm the manager tasked with implementing these new seismic resilience requirements for the Oregon's largest oil storage facilities. I have just a few overview comments to share, and we'll quickly stop talking so we can have time to get the questions you might have. First, about how we got here in the DEQ program. You've heard it all this morning and much before. The next magnitude 9 earthquake will happen. We don't know when, could be soon, could be decades or longer. I'll just say the spills predicted will be the worst environmental, public health, and economic catastrophe in North America if we can't avoid it. And we're racing that unseen clock with this mitigation work. So much work over the decades by folks with the city, governments of all stripes, so well described by Tom and all, community members, businesses, many of whom here today or are listening. The dire situation is well understood and communicated. befitting the magnitude of this problem. Thank you all for getting us to this point. Today, I'll simply note that the state law passed in 2022 requires most of Oregon's largest oil storage facilities to upgrade their operations to minimize risk, minimize harm of oil spills when the megaquake occurs. The key words there are minimize harm. Minimizing harm is the statutory standard and incredibly tall order. DEQ is committed to making it happen. Preventing these immense spills is the only viable approach to dealing with this risk. We included a short fact sheet in your meeting materials. It describes the major steps of seismic vulnerability assessment and also facility risk mitigation plan development. The fact sheet lists all the facilities subject to the 2022 law. 14 of the 17 are in the city of Portland, including the Portland Airport. All of the facilities are currently in compliance with DEQ requirements and are making progress toward meeting these goals. The initial assessments came in by the 2024 deadline that was set in statute.
Mike, can I have you pause for 1 minute? I have a couple of folks who aren't finding the presentation you're referring to online. Rebecca, do you know if that's listed on the website where the public and counselors can find it?
Yeah, it was just a brief fact sheet that lists the facilities, the 22.
Let's make sure that we get that to my office, and Rebecca will get it to you. So for folks who are watching online, for anybody from the public watching, we can post it after the fact so that they can look at it and cross-check what they're hearing from you now with what they can see on the paper later. Sorry to interrupt.
Council President, the memo that Mike's referring to was in the council packet. So it's that memo, so you all should have gotten that.
Okay, so counselors should have it in the email that you received, but for the public, we'll get it up online after the hearing, after the work session today. I apologize that it's not up already. And it's, Councilor Ryan is saying to me that it's attachment D if folks around the dais are looking for it. Thank you. Go ahead and continue. I apologize.
No, Council President, thank you for making that clear. I was saying that the state law requires this feasibility or the seismic assessments to be performed, and there was a 2024 deadline. All facilities submitted their initial seismic vulnerability assessment materials to us, and it's under adequacy review now, an iterative process. Each facility has unique aspects that put them on different timelines for completion. Until the assessments are complete, we won't have calendar deadlines for ultimate completion of the mitigation work. We do require that the mitigation implementation plan be completed within 10 years of the mitigation plan approval. Date-specific deadlines for that mitigation work will be included in the mitigation plans when they're ready for approval. Last, I want to emphasize that coordination is essential for this complex, multi-specialty, multi-jurisdiction work, as we've heard. Coordination with the city, county, state agencies, federal, Portland State University, community members, and others has been going on and needs to continue. For example, we know that the DEQ mitigation plan approvals must square up with city building permit approvals, like what occurred with the first mitigation project approved just this January at the Portland Airport. The Port of Portland is well ahead of this game with their whole seismic project, and the new tanks are already approved for construction. Coordination's going very well. From the beginning, it was noted that the DEQ requirements for oil storage resilience are just one piece of what's needed to protect ourselves. DEQ's work is intensely focused on inside the fence lines of the facilities. We've heard repeatedly from many, including facility operators themselves, that work outside the fence lines is needed too. That's where city and other involvement is essential, again, as we heard today. That could include area-wide shake alert systems, improvements to water supply that'll be needed in an emergency, egress, emergency access, fire control, and more. The existing DEQ program doesn't have the mandate or the funding to work on resilience outside the facility fence lines. But we can participate in conversations about it, and we're committed to coordinating facility mitigation work with area-wide work to get the most effective and economical outcomes. With that, we'll end, and happy to take further questions.
Thank you. Councilors, I'm just noting that we have just over an hour left, and we do have folks from the State Emergency Management Team coming, but it looks like we have a few questions. Councilor Green?
I'm actually just up in the queue for the broader.
Broader questions?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Novick, is your question specific to this panel?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Kortnoff, I just want you to elaborate on what mitigation efforts you can require. It's my understanding that actually you can require the companies to take steps to upgrade and ensure that the tanks don't explode and have the oil go all over the place. Is that more or less correct?
Councilor Novick, the standard is minimize risk, and we set a very low bar. That means no uncontained spill over a barrel of oil. So that would get to where your question leads. How they're going to do that is a business decision, like at the Portland Airport. Building all new tanks up to modern seismic code is one approach. Secondary containment of a spill is the other approach we anticipate to be heavily used for existing facilities. So mitigation might include really robust secondary containment to prevent it from impacting others.
And we actually talked a few weeks ago, and my understanding is you have the enforcement hammer to ensure that they take those steps to prevent spills. You can impose a penalty equal to the economic benefit of non-compliance. So if they're avoiding things that would cost them a lot of money, you can assess fines equal to that amount of money.
Councilor Novick, yes, enforcement is a part of our law. It's connected to the DEQ enforcement in general. There is a process for that involves a matrix of penalties we apply, and most especially applying a additional penalty for any economic benefit achieved for failing to comply with the law, which could be huge.
Thank you. I just want to note that this is a pretty big deal. I mean, Senator Dembrow introduced the legislation that led to these requirements, and it seems to me that if the companies are subject to these requirements and DEQ has the authority to enforce them, then that should dramatically reduce the risk posed by the DEI hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Smith, specific to this panel?
Yes, thank you. I want to go back to something that you said. You said you're only responsible for in the fence kinds of things. So who is responsible for outside the fence? Is that the Multnomah County or the City of Portland?
Councilor Smith, it is a complex web of agencies that Tom Armstrong and others summarized. So there isn't one answer to that. We're all responsible for parts of it, sometimes overlapping.
Okay, but you were very clear and very specific that you only do inside. And so I think we need some sort of map or cheat sheet that we can have to see who's responsible for what, because, most of us would probably say call DEQ. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Zimmerman?
Thank you. Been emergency management adjacent for a good part of my career. And so minimizing risk is grand in the large scope, but that risk, we could be successful and I could still lose a significant portion of my district. I'll put it that way, right? In terms of the way that term is used. So I'm trying to understand just from if we have mitigated to the point where no barrel of oil spills, or unmitigated, I think is the term you used, somewhat related to Councilor Smith's point in terms of the overlapping priorities, that doesn't mean that we were successful from necessarily the grander public's perspective, because if we haven't spilled any oil but we caught Forest Park on fire, DEQ might say we were successful in our mitigation efforts and we were pretty terrible in our emergency management efforts. And that's not on you. I'm just trying to understand, we've had all these rollout of different groups who have this overlapping responsibility, and it can be a little bit difficult to understand what lever to pull when we come up to the solutions discussion, so that we are relying on the information from the right bureaus, right departments, right agencies, federal, state, and local, to help us figure out this leverage. But I want to make sure that I'm understanding from a DEQ perspective, from a seismic resiliency perspective. I think you said all are in compliance or on their way into compliance right now as it sits. Was that accurate? Is that what you said?
Councilor Zimmerman, yes, all have made the submittals as required, and we're working on reviewing them. So it's a process more than anything else.
And I certainly understand that. I'm glad. Am I, by hearing that and knowing we have a variety of different types of fuels in the CEI area, right? Some, I think if I've got my facts right, I think natural gas is in a gel form of some sort over in the tanks. Some things are in what I'll just call like layman's oil form, and others, I don't even know what the right word would be. When you're speaking, are you talking about policies that address all those types of fuels or only a certain type of fuel as it relates? And it sounds like it's very related to bad product touching the earth, either ground or water.
Councilor Zimmerman, thank you for the question. That's a good one, because it does show that the different entities have different thresholds too. The Oregon law, it's defined in the legislation from 2022 is about oil, and a really broadly defined definition of oil, including asphalt, for example. The Northwest Natural facility, the large storage facility there, is included.
Okay.
Our statute sets our regulatory authority at 2 million gallons, paralleling but not identical to the city 2 million gallon threshold you heard about this morning too. But that's why we have 22, or 17, excuse me, in the state. Those are the facilities with over 2 million gallons of storage capacity. And there's many smaller ones, including in the CI hub.
And last question, and thanks, Madam President. If DEQ had the authority, is there a place in Portland that the agency has identified that would say this is a better location for this hub to exist than where it currently exists, given what we heard from Portland's emergency management earlier?
Councilor Zimmerman, that's a broader question than DEQ at this point. We have not been tasked or worked on alternatives. Our goal is to make the existing storage safe.
Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Councilor Clark?
Just a quick question, Madam President. So, hi, Mike. Thanks for being here today. So let me just understand, the bill required that the responsible parties submit information about their tanks and following that a mitigation plan. Is that right?
Councilor Craig, correct.
It's 2 steps.
Correct.
So, because I was under the impression that not all of them had responded with the first part. And so some of them actually have submitted the information, or all of them, the information about their tanks. And secondly, their mitigation plans. You have all their mitigation plans in hand, or you're waiting for them?
Councilor Clark, all the facilities submitted information as they had, which varying degrees of completeness. And the assessment information is about the geotechnical work for the facility, as well as the structural work, defining the equipment and its integrity. So they all submitted something. Some of them are very thin, some of them much more robust. That's the process we're working through. Nobody has submitted, only the Port of Portland has submitted mitigation design work for the airport fuel tanks that we've approved.
Great. Well, that's what I wanted to clarify, is that there were different degrees of information submitted. not all of them have really complied yet, and that mitigation is the next step. But you're reviewing the very first step at this point.
Councilor Clark, correct. When I said all in compliance, it meant to be in the context of with our deadlines, which are incremental.
And it could be incomplete information. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Just following up on that, for those submissions that are thinner and are perhaps not as complete as others, will DEQ continue to follow up until we have sufficient information, or is there a point at which you say that's close enough? How thorough will you require folks to be?
Council President, we expect them all to be complete and robust for defining the geotechnical as well as the mechanical issues. And we'll work through iterative loops, setting deadlines based on our judgment about how long it'll take to accomplish a task, to follow up. Those deadlines are how we enforce and where we would have to draw a line if in our judgment a submittal isn't completed in a timely manner. That's when we would enforce.
Thank you. It looks like we don't have other questions in the queue. Oh, Councilor Clark? For later. Okay, for later. Perfect. We don't have other questions in the queue for now. Thank you both so much for being here today. We will turn now to the State Emergency Management Panel. If we could get Jana Papatamayu back up, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. And we have Marianne Christian available now as well. Okay, Jana, why don't you get started then? Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mayor, Madam President, members of council, for the record, my name is Jana Papatamayu, and I am your Oregon State Resilience Officer. Thank you for inviting me to join you today and for letting me follow Mike Kortenhoff, who I think spoke well to the program at DEQ that's currently for seismic fuel tank stability. I'd like to if I can take a moment to reflect on how far we've come in our work on the CEI hub so far. Although today certainly illustrates that there is much left to be done, I think it's worth remembering that in 2012, when the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries first issued their study on seismic fuel tank risk in the critical energy infrastructure hub, it was a complete shock to many people in Oregon, including many neighbors and folks who live in Linton, and the level of risk there, I think, stunned all of us. And it's really because of effective and persistent advocacy on the part of neighbors, part of environmental groups, and also on the part of many folks, some in this room, to advance safety at the CEI hub to the place where we are now. And I think Commissioner Novick was really correct in noting that the 2022 bill, Senate Bill 1567, that adopted the seismic fuel tank stability rules, was a huge leap forward for the state of Oregon. That standard of minimizing risk means that when the plans are implemented in 10 years, that the minimum reportable spill is 42 gallons, and it's the design will be that no tank in the CEI hub spills up that amount, that minimum reportable spill, which means tanks in the CEI hub will be, by design, safer than the average gas station in terms of the amount of oil they're allowed to spill. That's surprising. Now, 10 years is probably 10 years too long for if you live near those tanks, and I know many folks feel that way, and certainly other folks have highlighted today other opportunities to ensure accountability and increase safety in the decade between now and when the retrofits are done. I think it's also worth highlighting that even when the tanks are fully retrofitted in the future, that there will be some outstanding safety risks. And the first one that comes to my mind is around the pipeline itself. As Tom said, the pipeline is running almost 100% full 100% of the time down from the Washington's Olympic Peninsula. That pipeline was built sections in the 50s and in the 60s. And so the pipeline itself does not have seismic strengthening in most parts. It's interstate commerce, so it's regulated by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration under the U.S. Department of Transportation, if anybody still works there. And I think it's a matter of, but I think there's a potential for federal advocacy on that issue because it really feels like the city of Portland and the state of Oregon have done their part in the places where they have regulatory purview to increase safety, and the pipeline is something that we absolutely need federal partnership to increase the safety. The other risk that I would highlight that will continue is that although the tanks are designed to not spill, they're also not designed to be accessible necessarily after an earthquake. And so we would have a tremendous fuel shortage across the state at a time when we really need fuel for first response and for public works to do the heavy work of moving debris and getting Oregon back moving. The Oregon Department of Energy has a plan around fuel resilience, and that talks about the need to increase fuel storage, not to build a new CI hub and make it somebody else's problem, but to increase fuel storage at places like county public works yards, at hospital backup generation, places that will need fuel in the immediate aftermath of an earthquake, so that we have sort of a more dispersed strategy that can also be a more resilient strategy for fuel in emergency response. So that's another place that the state is playing a role. But the last thing I'd like to maybe notice is that although I think we're all super clear about what we don't want in the CEI hub, this is also a place that I see as offering tremendous opportunity. The retrofits that are going to be required by the state over the next decade means that the incremental cost of maintaining tanks in the CI hub, frankly, is going to go up because retrofits cost money. And at the same time, our consumption of liquid fuel, especially unleaded gas for cars, it's going down because people are moving to electrics. And that means it's reasonable to assume that not every tank there will be retrofitted, but that the CI hub will in some fashion shrink its footprint. That is a fantastic stretch of the Willamette River. That's super close to downtown. It has the opportunity to create much more jobs and economic opportunity than it does currently. Fuel tank farms, they have a high environmental cost, but not a lot of people work there. There's not a lot of value added for fuel storage. Certainly in other ways, fuel is an engine of our economy, but there is I think an opportunity to see redevelopment in that area that if we can take a long view, would be a huge benefit for Portland. And also it's a stretch of river that right now has almost no public access. The uses that are there now are seen as really incompatible with even public coming to look at the river or be near it, but that's something that could also change in the future. So I think just as we recognize we're at a place where change for the CEI hub is inevitable for a lot of reasons, that change also presents an opportunity. And I think it would be delightful for the city, the county, and the state to all together imagine something that is what we do want in the CEI hub, because I think that is a potential, that's a future we could work towards together. And that's the comments I wanted to share with you. I'll pause now in case there are questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have anybody from the State Fire Marshal's office who has been able to join us? Okay. Councillor Green, is your comment for Jonna or general comment? Excuse me.
General.
Councillor Clark? General, and Councillor Craig-Mullane, yours is a general comment. Perfect, Jonna. I don't think we have any specific comments for you right now, but thank you so much for being with us today. I know that the work that you do coordinating our emergency response statewide and thinking about the CEI hub in relationship with our needs statewide is a really important piece of this puzzle. We appreciate you being part of our panel today. At this point, councilors, we have about 45 minutes left. I know a lot of people have general comments or questions for some of our city folks, so we will get to as much as we can. And for folks from the city who presented earlier, just be ready to jump in if a comment is something that you are best posed to answer. Councillor Green, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you, Madam President. My questions are related to the city's role with respect to the kind of presentation that we heard, but also in related to our comp plan and the LUX that we recently issued for Zenith. And so I think one of the things that I'm having a hard time with is in the presentation, we've got a number of slides from PBEM that present maps of both liquefaction risk, but then also wildfire risk. And, when I was reviewing the February 3rd land use compatibility statement for Zenith Energy, and the city's response to how it is in compliance with the 2035 comprehensive plan, it speaks to specifically the section on policies related to hazards as essentially saying, well, this repositioned facility doesn't present any hazards or is not, it's fine and it's safe. And one of the comments here specifically says Zenith property is flat, it's outside the 100-year and 500-year floodplain areas, and it's outside any mapped landslide hazard area or wildfire risk area. But it's hard for me to imagine that that's really a sort of adequate statement because, PBEM is saying this isn't a wildfire hazard area. It's adjacent to it. There's also no mention of liquefaction risk in that statement. So I'm hoping that we can have a little bit of a discussion here on how, the CI presentation and the risks that it presents. And I'm glad to know that we're going to go forward in a forward-looking process. But how does that coincide with the issuance of this new LUX? Do we have anyone here who's prepared to speak to that?
I can I can talk a little bit about the slides around the risk that have been put together. Councilman Green, when we in emergency response are talking about hazards and risk, we're talking in regards to the community and what their concerns are. So when I say a wildfire risk could potentially impact and is needed to be looked into in relation to CI Hub, when we are looking into evacuation planning, let's say for Linton neighborhood, and any particular hazard that happens within neighborhood that requires us to evacuate people or give them a pre-identified evacuation route, we are unable to do that because sending people in a direction which could potentially be on fire is not the best. That's why that's the big reason why we don't have a very specific evacuation plan for communities around Linton neighborhood. So I need to look into the particular document that you mentioned that city testified in terms of risk. I have not looked into it, but these are the risks that we have documented in our community wildfire protection plan that the county is lead on, and in our general natural hazard mitigation action plan that the city has owned. So we're looking into risks that are associated not just with CEI Hub as a facility, but hazards around it that would require to be looked into if we were to do a comprehensive hazard response plan for CEI Hub. And the reason I also mentioned particularly the wildfire risk or the industrial fire risk, a lot of what happens post Cascadia and how the fuel gets released would depend on the air, where the air plume is, and that could shift. We have studies that indicate where it's likely to go, but that could shift in terms of where the air is flowing, and that could be towards the forest park, could be towards in a different direction. So I wanted to highlight that part, that this is a complex, kind of complex facility to study, and it cannot be just liquefaction, cannot be just fire within the facility. It needs to be looked into all these hazards that touch upon the facility, and that's why I was specifically talking about those hazards. There are more that I didn't talk about because even as we talk about spills, we talk about on the surface spill, which gets into our sewer system, so BES becomes responsible. But then the waterway spills are slightly different up onto Bonneville Dam, which is where the kind of Coast Guard's tidal boundaries kind of come into picture. That we would have a different agency that would kind of help lead the response for that versus on the surface response. So it is a very kind of complex, interwoven, multi-agency response. And unfortunately, when there's so many agencies or so many hazards involved, they're like no one wants to be the lead, and that's where emergency management comes in picture. But That's the context of highlighting some of the hazards that are associated with the CEI hub, and I'll invite our Bureau of Planning and Sustainability partners to maybe add more context to it.
Yeah, thanks, Rashid. Kim, are you online? Hi, Kim. Could you walk through the staff analysis on the Lux, please? Thank you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kimberly Talent. I'm the Land Use Services Division Manager for Portland Permitting and Development. I do have to apologize. I did not come prepared to talk specifically about the Zenith application. Given that it's been a notice of intent to appeal has been filed with LUBA, I'd like to consult with our city attorneys first before I respond, and can get you any additional details at a later time.
Thank you, Kimberly. And I won't ask a question specific to that. That would put you in a tough spot with the notice of intent to appeal. It might be quasi-judicial, but what I would say, this is broader, I guess my question would be, do we have a practice of when we issue these permits, do we have a practice of working with PBEM to interpret the comprehensive plan, or is that just a separate, or do you do that internally within the permitting department? Because it doesn't, from what I'm understanding here, it does not look like PBEM consulted on the area of this Lux that spoke to these risks. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I'm not aware of consulting with PBEM on the prior applications. I would say in terms of what we in PP&D do on these types of permits and applications is we apply the zoning code. And so that doesn't have any regulations where we're reaching out to them to confirm things.
Thank you, but I will say that this Lux was designed to say that this is consistent with the 2035 comprehensive plan, which lays out policies associated with the risks. So in that regard, it's not just a zoning code interpretation, it is an interpretation of the consistency with the 2035 comprehensive plan. And so I'll just leave that comment there. I don't want to use up too much time, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Clark?
Thank you, Madam President. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First of all, I just want to thank all the Linton neighbors, the ladies of Linton, for all the work that you've done, because if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be here today. If it weren't for citizen action, we would not be here having this discussion today. So I express my appreciation to you and all the other people who've spoken today. As somebody who also lives in a subduction zone, I appreciate the level of anxiety that we live with every day. And I want to express my frustration about this whole process and how long it takes to get anything done. My biggest takeaway today is Mr. Norwell's comment that we are underprepared and that no one wants to take the lead. Waiting for a decade for the mitigation plans, I understand that's a part of the law, but it doesn't provide me with much confidence or security. This is a tangled web of governments that have different responsibilities. And I wanted to know, is there a table where all these folks come together, all these agencies, to discuss the issue and to figure out who will take the lead or how we take the lead? And that's not necessarily a rhetorical question. I just wanted to know if in the FEMA grant that we received, is there the possibility that the City of Portland can provide that table for everyone to come to so that we can maybe even expedite some of this? I hope we're not limited in the FEMA grant to merely rezoning, that we can pull everyone together, that we can take that responsibility.
No, and you're absolutely right. When we get into long-range planning and talking about potentially changing comprehensive plan policies or zoning code, we can set a table that's inclusive.
Well, Madam President, I hope we can do that sooner rather than later to set that table. I don't know why we have to wait in order to do that.
We can take that up.
Councilor, I think that there are a number of folks around the dais who were nodding yes as you were saying that. And this could be something that having one of us help on may expedite. So it sounds like you may be stepping up to that, but I know you have a colleague to your right and one online who chair a committee that looks at this also. So I would encourage us to have some conversations in the future about who might be able to help with that. And when I say the future, I mean the very near future. Councillor Koyama Lane.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for everyone here who is here to discuss the city's role with the CEI Hub. This is really top of mind for a lot of my constituents. I literally rode the bus this morning to City Hall and had a constituent on the bus talking with me about this very topic. And I'll also thank you for these presentations. There's a lot of history. Can be a big, dense topic. And I think whoever made these presentations did a good job of laying out the information in kind of a 101 manner. My questions today are related to the City Council Ordinance 191896, which was passed unanimously last September. Thank you for this, Councilor Ryan. This ordinance specifically accepted the receipt of $406,000 from the Oregon State Office of Emergency Management, and then was also supplemented by $45,000 from the city for 2 staff positions to develop amendment and code change proposals. Let me know if I'm incorrect about any of this. The title of the ordinance captures the purpose well: accept and appropriate grant for $405,720 from the Oregon Department of Emergency Management for the Fossil Fuel Terminal Zoning and Comprehensive Plan Amendments Project. So I would like clarification on 2 related provisions. So I'll quote directly from the ordinance itself, which specifically addresses community impacts and community involvement. So it says BPS, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, will consult with other public agencies, academia, business, and community groups to identify potential code and policy concepts. BPS will undertake a public involvement process to review the concepts, which will include stakeholder interviews, focus groups, community meetings, and web-based information and opportunities for feedback. Public involvement will continue with the legislative adoption process, with notices of public hearings, with opportunities for written and oral testimony before the Planning Commission. Then the second part is that the budget also included, as from what I understand, as supplemental materials with the ordinance, $104,000 for public involvement. So I want to know if and how constituents, groups, neighborhoods have been involved in advocacy up to this point around the CEI Hub. I'm looking out, I think a lot of these people here are folks that we would hope are being included, brought into discussions related to developing these concepts, proposals, plans around the CEI Hub. We've heard in a few meetings that BPS is working on these plans. We'd then have a work session on March 17th. Here we are, hearing about these plans. So my wonderings is, about the ordinance has a requirement for community involvement from the point of conception of ideas, and I'm wondering how that's going. If it hasn't really happened and we're starting the conversation and presenting ideas right here, even only as draft proposals, I am concerned that framework is being laid in which further amendment discussions will take place, and really want to make sure that the public is part of foundational steps. So we know the ordinance calls clearly for the public to be engaged. I see the people who are going to respond are coming on up, as well as being involved in later processes. So in a lot of meetings, we've acknowledged we need to be building community trust around this topic. We need to make sure that community members are involved and that the engagement is real. And so I'd like to hear where the city is at with community involvement as outlined in this ordinance.
I'll just start again for the record. My name is Eric Kingstrom, the interim director at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. In general, our planning policies call for public involvement at every step of a legislative project like this. So as you said, we should be engaging in public engagement early on to develop concepts. Typically, once concepts are developed, we also have opportunity for comment on those concepts. And then once something's formalized through the Planning Commission, there's of course opportunity for for public hearings, but we always start much earlier. I'm going to turn it over to Tom to talk about where specifically we are with that grant project.
Yes, thanks. And it is the case, we're getting started, and we're transitioning staff, many of which helped prepare the presentation today. And so it is a process where up to this point it's been informal conversations with community and community advocate representatives, and now we'll start a more formal process with formal meetings and outreach to generate these policy ideas and different concepts that will become more concrete proposals as we move through the spring and into the summer.
Okay, I just want to encourage you to lean on us counselors, especially the ones that are on related committees. We are, connected with constituents, and we are going to hear from constituents if they're not feeling engaged. And even just looking around the room, I hear people kind of being like, yeah, we want to be included. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that it's going to happen. I wish that it had happened before this point, but I look forward to hearing about next steps.
And Councilor, if I may also just add that now that we're to the point where the council's committees are up and running, I think we would love to engage with the appropriate committees during the early scoping phase of this project and have those conversations.
Thank you.
This is something that I think both those committees as well as counselors with district ties are very interested in. So the more that we can know where that process is and maybe get some regular updates about how that's going, the easier it will be for us to communicate with constituents. And I would be remiss, counselors, in not mentioning that as we were talking previously about having somebody from our council take the lead to make sure that this work continues quickly. Councillor Canal was nodding vigorously also. I just was pointed the other way as I was looking, so I didn't see it at first. Councillor Canal, you are up in the queue.
Thank you, everyone, for putting this together. A couple quick notes. I will have 3 questions, one to Tom Armstrong, one to Mr. Narwhal, and one to Director Engstrom. I'm grateful we're doing this. I'd like to, the next time we have a council conversation on this, see non-governmental experts in the future, as well as community input opportunities. I'd also like to note the Community and Public Safety Committee would ideally be involved in this in addition to climate and transportation and infrastructure when we do get to those conversations. I also want to note that there was the idea raised of moving the CEI hub within the city, which was surprising. I'm happy to discuss working with other jurisdictions to look outside the city for new sites. But after looking at the maps and seeing that all the large areas of industrial land besides the CEI hub itself are in D2, that implies to me that moving it within the city would mean moving it to D2, which is not just a no, but a hell no from me. And thank you for mentioning redeveloping the waterfront, Jana. Finally, I want to just, to kind of ease into the first question, note that there's been a lot of talk about wildfire risk, but not enough about industrial fire risk. There's briefly mentioned on 2 of the slides, slide 31 explicitly, but it wasn't brought up as much. So I just want to note that. First question to Mr. Armstrong, why are only 6 facilities covered by franchise agreements when we've seen some of the others listed in these documents that there's significantly more than 6? Could you just clarify that?
Yeah, the 6 facilities that were listed under the franchise agreement, they're the ones that operate the pipeline connections that are under the street and in the public right-of-way. So the other facilities connect to those pipelines, but they don't actually operate the pipelines, if you will.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So from that particular type of jurisdiction is
for the franchise agreement aspect of it. Those are the 6 that are responsible for the pipes in the street.
Thank you. Mr. Narwhal, you mentioned that at the local level, funding from CEI Hub businesses for a dedicated planner to coordinate local and regional agencies would be advantageous and to be honest, needed. Could you speak first to what the mechanism is here? You mentioned it would take a council mandate.
Yeah, I would be honest, I haven't done the full assessment of what council can authorize to private private facility, and maybe someone else from my team can talk more about this. But what I mentioned was, as you all kind of noticed, that there are so many agencies that are involved, even to efficiently respond to not the zoning and coding part of things, the emergency response side of things. And there are agencies that I did not put on that slide because I wasn't sure or clear on what their role would be. So I did not want to give information that I wasn't comfortable with. So there's definitely resources needed to put together an emergency response plan that's more dedicated to CEI Hub as a facility, and also communities that would be more directly impacted by accident at CEI Hub. In terms of getting that resource, right now we have 0.5 FTE as a planner that is responsible for planning across all those plans for all of the city. So we're under resourced. One of the legislative item that DEQ is working on, I believe it was 2151, which talks about expanding the hazard mitigation fund's use, which would allow us to apply for more grants and funding opportunities to DEQI to get access to that fund, and potentially for uses like this. And as we were preparing this presentation, there was an idea floated that if we can get council on board to help private business, CEI Hub, fund a position within emergency management that could help us coordinate these resources and agencies and roles and responsibilities at all the levels, we should pursue it. I can get back to you with details of how that would work out and what mechanism we need to use. But I'm sorry, I don't have that ironed out right now.
Yeah, I would love to hear that, to get that information. For those who don't know, PBEM has been getting cut year after year after year and is down to, I believe, 13 FTE in total, roughly. That may be one off in either direction there, but I would love to help assist with that, and this seems like a really good way to do it. So having that mechanism would be good to know. And my question is effectively why we would stop at a dedicated planner and not have a conversation about an industrial fire brigade. Because, and this relates to the question that Councilor Smith asked about the Port of Portland. We have the port has, or the airport, I should say, the Port of Portland has dedicated specialized firefighters for the types of fires that occur at an airport when an emergency happens. We do not have the capability for the types of fires that occur at a facility like the CEI Hub. That's something that other cities have done in a couple different ways. Some do it internally, some do it where the companies collaborate on developing their own. I think the best way to ensure public trust on this particular thing would have it be within the city. And I would love to pursue understanding what that would take and the types of costs associated with it, obviously in collaboration with both leadership and labor at Portland Fire and Rescue. So that's the question I have there. And so, Mr. Nerwal, as you're looking into it, please look at it at the scale necessary to not just fund a single FTE as a planner in terms of that mechanism, please. I'll let you respond, and then I have the question for Director Engstrom.
No, I was just going to say I will look into it and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Engstrom, my question was actually going to be very similar to the Council Vice President's a moment ago, but I just want to follow up on that and note that your response to the Council Vice President a moment ago was about community input on plans in the form of public comment. And I just want to note that there is a distinction between that and what the ordinance actually refers to, which is comprehensive community engagement. And public comment is insufficient to check that box. It is necessary. It's a part of it. But I'd like to ask about the parts of it that are beyond that. It talks about public involvement in the exhibit to that ordinance in a more holistic way than waiting to react until there's a plan developed internally. Now, certainly there's already been decades of community input on this, and I agree with Councilor Clark that community members are the reason we're even talking about this at all, specifically in Linton. But I'd like to understand beyond the reactive, when the decision is 95% made already form of input, what other forms of public involvement we intend to use that $104,000 for.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And just to make sure I'm clear, apologies if I wasn't, the engagement strategy for the planning work we do is not just commenting on after a draft is out. We will do public involvement in the in the formative stages to solicit feedback on the direction that we're going to take the project before things are written down.
Thank you. And I guess just the clarification follow-up on this. My understanding is that the deadline for completion of that project is February 1st of next year. Are we on track for that timeline?
Tom, would you like to come up and talk about the timeline?
Yeah, the terms of the grant program, the first deadline that is in the grant now is February 1st, and we'll start working towards that. There also is within the program the option to request extensions within that if the decision-making process goes beyond that deadline.
It's not unusual in a legislative project that's grant funded to have some extension of time because we don't control the pace of the legislative adoption. So often the work we do under the grant is the preparing the material to enter that deliberative process.
So is at present, do you have an intention to or a need to request that extension, or can we expect that at least the public involvement portion of this will occur by February 1st, 2026?
Oh, the public involvement will occur by that time. And I think part of that community conversation is what will drive the timeline in terms of what we hear from the community, how we develop those concepts. And then once we get into the more formal public hearing, how long does the Planning Commission take to deliberate and make a recommendation council? How long does the council committee process to get to? That will determine the ultimate timeline of this project.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Madam President.
Councillor Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the presentations. It's the first time I heard a big comprehensive CEI hub meeting focused conversation that included multiple agencies. So that's a step in the right direction. I'm going to kind of riff off of a little bit about what Councillor Clark mentioned, which is where's the table? And specifically, I was taken by the legacy challenge that you started off with, Tom, this morning. And then I want to just say that listening to all of this for the last 2 hours and 15 minutes we kept coming back to the fact that there's really no mitigation that's going to survive the big one. It's the big deal is there a place to relocate it? How would we do that? Oh my God, what a bit expensive ordeal this will be. And yet then you would hear from others that said conversations on where to relocate has not yet started. So just take that in. We're an area that's struggled for a couple decades trying to build a bridge across the Columbia. So we know we struggle when it comes to big, challenging, legacy challenging issues like this. So it kind of gets back to that question is this a goal for all of you? And if it is, who's taking charge to convene that table? And although I have a lot of empathy for what's going on with all federal agencies this morning, that is the one group that's not here today. And clearly it'll be federal, state, and local that would need to come together to make this decision. So clearly I don't think anyone's saying, I want this in my backyard, although there are parts of the state where the infrastructure could probably be built. Some would probably welcome the revenue that would come in to their coffers, and we will have our own loss of that revenue when it goes away. What a wonderful problem to have. So my question is, does anyone have the political will to take leadership on setting up that table? And I looked to the head of DEQ, I looked to the head of these bureaus at the county, the city, who get paid to think about this daily. Who's having that conversation? Where is it? It's fascinating to sit up here and keep hearing that as a theme, but then you don't hear any vision on where that table is, and is it actually a goal? Or is it just going to be a threat we're going to talk about?
Suggest that we ask Jonna to weigh in on this as well as our State Chief Resilience Officer.
Good. Thank you, Madam President.
Jonna, are you still with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. The question,
relocating the CEI hub, just to
Yeah,
summarize?
the big thing that everyone likes to say, but you don't ever hear any follow-up about action and who's actually going to take charge. Yeah, just tell me a little bit more about that conversation that you almost have daily. Yeah.
I'm delighted to share, but I'm afraid my answer isn't to relocate the CEI hub. The CEI hub is, this is not going to be popular, but it's located at the confluence of a river, 2 rail lines, and a pipeline, all of which are extremely hard to move. So the idea of relocating the CI hub would, at a minimum, mean redirecting or lengthening the pipeline. And I think that the process to accomplish that would be longer than the timeline for the future of unleaded gas in cars. I think it would take much longer than a decade, which is what we're looking at to retrofit the pipes that are there. I think that my hope is that if we're going to put energy and resources to not facing risks of the CEI hub, then it isn't to visit the risk of a giant fuel terminal on some other community in Oregon, but is thinking out how we can accelerate a transition away from fossil fuels so that the pipeline, so the CI hub doesn't go somewhere else, but it goes away, it shrinks. And the fuel that we still do need for emergency response and public works is decentralized, which is in a lot of ways a more resilient strategy and is stored at different places around Oregon.
Thank you, Jonna. That was very clear and concrete. It'd be refreshing if you could convene a group of leaders in each jurisdiction to see if they agree with you, and if we could then start aligning our focus on what's next then. It just feels it feels very scattered, and that's not ever going to move the work along in something really complex. We're looking for leadership from those in these bureaus today to come together and provide what that action plan is.
I'd be so delighted to be a part of that. Thank you.
Mr. Engstrom, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that BPS is happy under the auspices of the project that we have funded through the FEMA grant to, at least in the near term, host a table and work with the state to have that some aspects of that multi-agency discussion.
Thank you for that commitment. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, as to Councillor Ryan's comment that no mitigation is going to be sufficient to survive the big one, it's my understanding that the mitigation that DEQ is requiring is going to be to ensure that those oil tanks do survive the big one and don't spill. Jonna or Mr. Kortenhoff, can you confirm that?
That's correct.
Okay. Also, I just wanted to say that although 10 years is a long time, my assumption is that retrofitting these tanks is going to be a big fat construction project or a series of them, and that takes time. So we might want to have Mr. Kortenhoff back up at some point to talk about whether it could be speeded up. But I frankly am relieved at the idea that 10 or 12 years from now, assuming the earthquake hasn't happened, the risk of massive oil spills will have been reduced, or hopefully eliminated. I also wanted to note that the reason the CI hub exists is that there is demand for fossil fuels. Transportation is the biggest source of carbon emissions in the city of Portland. And as Jada said, we can reduce the amount of fuel that's in the CI hub by reducing our demand for fossil fuels. We can do that in the city of Portland by making investments in charging stations and subsidizing purchase of electric cars, by investing in transit, by investing in bike ped infrastructure. And we have a source of revenue for that, the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which originally was envisioned to only bring in $30 million a year, but now at $200 million a year is enough that we could actually make progress on those things. So that is one reason that I'm prepared to cross swords with anybody who suggests we should start raiding the Clean Energy Fund to deal with our current budget problems by spending it on things that have little or nothing to do with climate change. Finally, I just wanted to say that my crude, pun intended, assumption was that the risk of fire from the CEI hub is largely a matter of being afraid that the tanks would explode and the oil would catch fire. So if the tanks don't explode, that wouldn't happen. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe somebody can enlighten me on that. Thank you.
I know we don't have the state fire marshal here. I do see some folks in the back. I know you're trying to hide, but is there anything that you could add about the fire risk? Please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Yes, Steve Bregman, Deputy Chief of Special Operations for Portland Fire and Rescue.
Lieutenant Brian Profit, Hazmat Coordinator for Portland Fire and Rescue.
So I think first I'd like to go back to what Councilor Canal mentioned with the Industrial Fire Brigade and touch on that very briefly. He mentioned that we don't have the capability or the, maybe alluded to it towards the subject matter expertise. I would say that's actually not the case. We do have that capability. Station 24 specializes in that. We have a specialized foam unit there and other equipment. The members there travel to Texas to train at Texas A&M University TEACS in fuel storage firefighting activities. So while we have that capability, I think what would be more accurate to say is we lack some capacity. And that probably goes across the emergency management spectrum of the POETI, the planning, the organizing, the equipping, training, and exercising. So we have the capability. I think we need to look at the capacity for that. In terms of the...
Just so folks here know, Station 24, I believe that's the Swan Island Station, is that correct?
Yes, it is the Swan Island Station, yes.
Thank you.
And all of our firefighters across the 31 stations have an awareness in fighting fuel fires. So one station truly specializes in it, and then there's a general awareness across the other stations.
And to answer Council Novak's question, the tanks don't explode. The earthquake could rupture the tanks, and what product is in those tanks would spill out. There are all of the facilities in the CI hub have containment dikes and capabilities for containing most of the product. That product, once it does rupture out of the tank, there is the potential for it to catch fire, yes, from anything else that would be, an electrical or a secondary fire within the area. So there is the potential for that. That potential also, the containment could be breached within the earthquake due to the liquefaction and everything else, which is the fear for it to get into the rivers. Does that answer?
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking is that to the extent that I was assuming that to the extent that there is a risk of fire from the CI hub and earthquake, it would be a fire by the oil catching fire. And I just wanted to clarify that that's the case, or is there some other fire risk the CI poses aside from the oil catching fire?
No, I think most of it would be the oil catching fire. Yes.
Thank you both for coming up. I appreciate it.
Certainly.
Oh, you know what, before, Councilor Knoll, I want to make sure that folks who haven't gotten to ask yet. So I think we're good for now, but we may bring you back up. Councilor Zimmerman and councilors, if you have the time to run about 5 minutes over, I think we can get to everybody in the next 10 minutes. Councilor Zimmerman?
I think it's probably for Donnie. I'm just curious if the tenants of this area are betting that a major disaster won't happen, and so remaining there is feasible in their estimation, or is relocating more expensive than dealing with the aftermath of a catastrophic event, or do they believe that they're the first collection of corporations who have combined to defeat Mother Nature?
Thank you for the question.
A little sarcastic, but
Counselor,
also a little bit trying to be about costs here, and it was related to the county's presentation.
Correct, and I might invite John to go through some of the mechanics if he's still around. I think one of the strategies of the county's responding is that it's a two-tier system that encourages like those early investments to mitigate that will drive down the costs that they would be contributing to. So that's one component. I don't think that anybody at this point should be calculating any sort of victory over Mother Nature. I think so far, Mother Nature's winning the game, for better and for worse, in terms of our emissions. As far as what these particular facilities are contemplating, I think we need to see what the DEQ's reports are as far as compliance with those seismic upgrades are going to be going forward. But I think there is, per Tom's, in the memo in your packet, per Tom's presentation, we are seeing a reduction in fuel usage in general as people electrify. And to Jonah's point, there are still going to be fuel needs, and how we deploy those fuels around the city and the region are the next step. So if they want to be at the table for those, that's their prerogative. But the reality is that the CEI facility as we know it is going to change, and it has to. There's not an option one way or the other.
Okay. I'm kind of approaching this, and I hope that my colleagues will approach this as it's a two-pronged topic here. One is the mitigation and response, and two is the more long-term sustainability aspect, changing fuels. But let's remember, this presentation started by saying that the pipeline is already at capacity, and that's why we get ships and trains. And so if we reduce, eventually the ships and trains might stop, but the pipeline is, I think my point here is we are decades away. We are not 1 decade away. We are decades away from that kind of transition where this area becomes obsolete in terms of American way of life. And so I'm trying to be, Councilor Ryan's questions got right to the heart of it. It doesn't sound like there's an appetite to move, that it's really not feasible. And I think we need to start talking far more clearly that it isn't going to move. And I'm pretty disappointed by that, but that was one of the first statements that we got from the governor's representative, that this is unlikely to occur. I think we need to grapple with that. I think that that long-term strategy that I think some other committees can work on is important. But my hope for PBEM, for fire, for others is that we do start talking about mitigation. I wonder the last time, and if we ever have, had an exercise relative to a disaster in this zone, if we incorporated Oregon's CBRN Enhanced Response Force package or Washington's HERF package, which is about mass casualties, mass decontamination, that is a local resource. So I think it would be good for us to be clear-eyed about what is realistic and what we can mitigate and try to prevent. I think, to Donnie's point, I would be very interested in what DEQ report comes out. But I don't think we should stop there. My last request is that I hope that Portland Emergency Management will bring forward a budget proposal to specifically tell us how we are exercising related to this topic in the future, right? I think that will be helpful for us to start grappling our head around what it means. And the other thing, I've lived here my entire life. I'm still a little unclear for how hellish liquefaction is, right? I've got one company who says, my building can take a 9-inch drop in the land. I don't know what that means, right? I think some understanding for what do we expect to occur, what will the Willamette waterfront look like after an event so that we can be more clear-eyed. And then I will push back a little bit on the public involvement piece. I think we've gotten to the point now where we can do public involvement for the next 10 years and we'll be having this exact same conversation. I want to hear from experts in the field, scientists, geologists, emergency managers, et cetera, about solutions and not why we have a problem. I'm clear on that. Councilor Clark made it clear. The ladies of Linton had made that clear. I know we have a problem. I am looking for solutions-based. I'm not looking for 10 years of neighborhood meetings about the problem we know. And Donnie, this is not directed at you. It's a collective statement. So that's what I'm looking for. PBEM, I've given you a task. I hope I'll see you in the budget time. And then just to the colleagues, I hope we can talk about the two-prong approach. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Dunphy.
Thank you. My colleagues, you've done an amazing job of asking all the questions I was going to ask. There's one thing that is remaining for me, and it's simply an annoying fact about this spot. We keep hearing liquefaction. Anything built along the bank of a river is going to inherently be made out of sediments. But the Willamette River was, in the 50s, not an adequate deep water port. And the dredging of that port, in order to facilitate this commerce, The material was moved from the middle of the river to the bank of the river. They knocked it down so it was flat and they built oil tanks on top of it. It is literally the muck from the bottom of the river that sets the base for where these tanks are. I think that is really important for when folks are hearing liquefaction. We're talking about river muck that has been made relatively stable. That is insane to me that anybody thought that was a good idea. That is my only comment. I just want the public to make sure that we all are working with the same facts here.
Councillor Canal, can you do this in 2 minutes or less?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think I may have misspoke earlier, or implied a broader sense about industrial firefighting. Station 24 is across a bridge. It's 5.3 miles away, driving from Zenith. You know, each of the terminals has a different distance, but it's a few miles away driving. And one of the concerns that comes up is that there may not be a functional bridge in the case of a disaster. So my concern, I guess, remains that proximate firefighting capacity within the site, within the hub, or immediately adjacent to it is sort of the question that I'm trying to daylight here. So that's just a clarification. I really appreciate both the chief and lieutenant coming up and clarifying for me, because I was, I think, insufficiently precise there. But that's the question that I'm trying to understand here. And I know there are marine firefighting capabilities as well to explore, but I think it's a really important conversation to kind of bring up here, not just from the perspective of firefighting, but to Mr. Narwhal's point about there are risks that are not just after the fact that we should be having these, the people creating the risks pay for now, right? We've been talking about risk bonding as an after the fact payout. And I think there's also the question of what happens now that that creates lesser harm later if we're having folks pay for it. So that's my broader point, and I will leave it at that. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who presented today and who has joined us. Thank you to the folks in the communities most affected by the CEI Hub who are here with us today to hear the same information that we are hearing. I think we heard some really disturbing things. We heard again that this is not just a bad, but the worst place for these tanks to be, that we are underprepared and no one wants to take the lead, and that perhaps it's actually faster to mitigate than to build new tanks and pipelines and store the fuel elsewhere. We also heard some very heartening and helpful things like the update on what DEQ is doing, which is actually a very big deal in terms of starting to create some protections for communities, though certainly not enough. I would just say that we cannot accept a generation-long wait for safety for communities in our districts. And I think there's broad agreement across the dais about that. So I hope that today has allowed us to level set our background so that committees can start to take up conversations that we just scratched the surface of. I know there are at least 3 committees whose work may touch on this, possibly more, and we'll make sure to stay coordinated so that all of you, both our experts and the public watching, know where to hear what pieces of the conversation, and we're having a holistic conversation, possibly one with other entities coordinated by BPS, it sounds like, as we move forward. Thank you all for being here, and I will close our work session.